So today we will look at the Balatia Jataka, which is number 504 in the Pali collection of 547 such past life stories of the Buddha. Again, teisho is a form of zazen. Please sit comfortably. Don't tilt your head too far back. If you do, you'll get a crick in your neck. It'll create discomfort. Also, it'll be harder to pay attention. So let your head be straight on, look straight ahead, and then just drop your eyes. Don't tilt your head forward, that is back or too far forward. That'll also cause sleepiness. So, long ago, the story goes, long ago the Bodhisattva was a king named Balatia. Things were not going so smoothly for him. His courtiers back then kept coming to him wanting this or that. He and his queen were bickering over petty things. Even his shoes seemed too tight, which is when he suddenly remembered how much he loved being out alone, hunting. Taking off his crown and taking up his bow, a quiver of arrows, and a hunting spear, he whistled for his hounds. Slipping from the palace, he set off for the Himalayan slopes, the dogs bounding excitedly around him. Out on the forested heights with his hounds, his weapons and skills, the king felt renewed and alive. At night, staring into the fire, looking up at the stars, surrounded by his pack of sleepy dogs, he was content. So he stayed out there, hunting deer, boar, and forest birds. On the third day, he heard a man and a woman sobbing somewhere nearby. What is that? He thought. Putting aside his weapons and signaling for his hounds to stay, he proceeded up the wooded slope alone. He was a king. He knew about issues. Peering through the bushes, he was astonished to see two graceful kinnaras, part human, part bird-like beings with their arms wrapped around each other, sobbing. He stepped forward, cleared his throat, and asked, "May I help? I am the king of this land, and if someone has harmed you..." The kinnaras, a handsome man and a beautiful woman, ceased weeping, wiped their eyes, and said, "Thank you, your majesty, but no one has harmed us." "Why then do you weep?" "Your majesty," said the man, Kinnara, "we were separated. We feel such sorrow over this we can hardly bear it." "The time we lost can never be retrieved," said the woman, Kinnara. "Life is short like a flash of lightning, and so we grieve." "You see," said the man, "we are never apart. Never. Every night we are together. Yet one night I was on one side of the river gathering fruit and flowers, and I was on the other," said the woman, "gathering wildflowers with which to deck ourselves in our night's resting place. And it began to rain, harder and harder," said the man. "The river rose so quickly that it was a raging torrent before I could cross over. Desperately, my arms full of wild fruits and berries, I ran back and forth along the bank in that downpour, seeking some way to get across." "And desperately I too ran, my arms full of flowers," added the woman, her voice catching with grief at the memory. "But alas, I too could find no way to ford that flood. There was no bridge, none. We called to one another through the night, he from one bank and I from the other, weeping at our forced separation." "Oh, how we called," said the man. "And how we wept," added the woman. "So close, yet not close enough. And remembering this now, we cannot help but weep." The king was moved. "How long ago did this happen? I don't remember any heavy rains these past weeks." "That was 697 years ago," said the man, Kinnara, sadly. "One night lost to us," added the woman, Kinnara, wiping her eyes, "that we can never recover." The hairs rose along the king's neck. A curtain lifted. He saw strange vistas of time. How long do you live?" he stammered. 1,000 summers," they replied, "always healthy and well, never aging." And then like feathers blown on the wind, we drift from this life light and free. May you be well and happy, said the king, bowing, then backing away as if from a more than royal presence. When he returned to his whining hounds, he gathered his weapons and, calling his dogs to heel, headed back down the mountain for home. 700 years, he thought, and still they remember and weep. Life is short. Separations are not wise. It's time to build bridges, not run away. He looked down at the weapons in his hands. It's time to stop killing, too. Every life is short. Too short. His step was kingly as he descended the mountain. He had found new purpose. Deep within, vows of resolve were forming that would carry him onto new paths of meaning and challenge. Down below were his city and his people, his courtiers and queen. Somehow he couldn't wait to see them again, those who were coming closer with each newly determined step. So now we'll look at this from the perspective of our practice. We'll begin with a quote from William Butler Yeats. I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree. The only complete translation into English of the Pali collection, published in 1895, of the entire Jataka, which is now available online, by the way. I've posted a link to it at the Endless Path Zendo Facebook page a few postings back. So you can take a look at all of the Jatakas from this 1895 English translation, the only complete translation into English that we have. Anyway, that translation quaintly calls these two non-human beings in this Jataka fairies, invoking a kind of Midsummer Night's Dream atmosphere for the tale. Given their deep attachment to one another and their aversion to separation, they should more properly have been called kinnaras, as these are the traditional characteristics ascribed to such beings. Indeed, this Jataka is carved in relief at the great Buddhist monument of Borobudur, and there the two non-humans are clearly shown as kinnaras, half human, half bird. Odd encounters with non-human, not simply animal beings, have been recorded through the millennia. Today, we might call kinnaras aliens and think about flying saucers or dimensional doorways. But maybe non-human beings have always been around. Buddhist sutras say that Nagas, Garudas, Kinnaras, Devas, Asuras, Yakshas are part of our planet's greater ecosystem. They say, too, that worlds are scattered like grains of sand throughout the universe, and that at least modern science easily confirms. Another thing that is odd about this little Jataka is that the Bodhisattva is a hunter. The first Buddhist precept is not to kill, but to cherish all life. Ahimsa, or non-harming, is the foundation of Buddhist ethics. So what's going on? Hunting is killing. Buddhism holds that all beings want to live and be happy. Even bacteria resist death. It can take increasingly powerful antibiotics to wipe out a culture, the name with which we grace bacterial colonies. Yet in this tale, the Bodhisattva is a man with weapons, hounds, and a taste for grilled meat. He has not taken vows of non-harming. Perhaps this Jataka is early on in his Bodhisattva career. Except for the last 10 Jatakas, these stories are not arranged in any order. We can only theorize a sense of progression by seeing what happens in the story. Like the Bodhisattva in this tale, many of us today live like kings and queens of old. Periodically, we too feel a need to heed the call, leave complexity, renounce our piles of accumulated stuff, and head off with the simplicity of campsite or cabin. We want to touch the ground, reconnect with nature, and have a kind of retreat. The Bodhisattva, as this hunter king long ago, like us, was already seeking Zen's ordinary mind. And indeed, out in the wild, he unwinds. Stars wheel overhead at night, and a golden sun rises each morning. How ordinary, How wonderful! And then comes that sobbing. Just then, when everything is going so well, the king, touching the ground of peace, hears sobbing. Instantly his royal skills are reawakened. Issues? I know about them. And off he goes to investigate. Going up the mountain alone, his dogs might have frightened the weepers. In this we see his strength and sensitivity. He finds two delicate, non-human beings in anguish, and, being king, capable perhaps of doing something about it, he asks, "What is the cause of your suffering?" It is the question beneath all our lives. What is the cause of this suffering? The Kinaras answered that though they always want to be together, they were nonetheless separated. Mythically, the Kinaras are expressing their essential identity. Always lover and beloved, they never produce offspring, lest that disturb their perfect affection or create separation. So this forced separation caused by the sudden downpour and flood cuts them to the core. Creatures of extraordinary, more than human grace and beauty, they are devastated to have been forced apart. They have no skills with which to face what life has thrust upon them. Their delicate perfection is shattered, and they cannot get over or around it. They cannot recover. Anguish is our experience too, of the first noble truth that will be proclaimed by the Buddha, who is this king and hunter hundreds, if not thousands or millions of lifetimes ahead. We suffer because we too often feel separated from what we love, forced to be where we'd rather not be. The second truth of the noble truths reveals that the source of our anguish is our own death grip on the concept of a separated, permanent self. Our terror starts with the knowledge that this supposedly permanent self is fading, rusting, dying with every breath. Yet we cling to it as if it were not simply provisional, but solid. This is the, quote, human condition, unquote. O monks, said the Buddha in the fire sermon, the world is on fire with the fires of greed, hatred, and ignorance. Imagining that we are separate from bugs, stars, rivers, clouds, plants, animals, trees, people, we try to fulfill the needs of that separated self and so light the fires of greed, hatred, and ignorance. Confused and misled, we set ourselves an impossible, delusive task. How could we be separate when every element of every atom in our bodies has arisen from the explosion of a distant star? How could it be true when the deepest, most fulfilling moments of our lives come, not when we cling to the belief that we're separate, but when we let it go? The sense of separation that plagues us can roll up like bamboo blinds, and an undiscovered but oh so familiar country be revealed. As Zen Master Hakuin says in his song in praise of Zazen, the place where we stand is the pure lotus land, and this very body, the body of Buddha. Yet as the Lotus Sutra says, in the midst of the conflagration with our house on fire, we still sit around playing games. We may lie, cheat, and steal while persistently running toward what seems to offer comfort despite the pain it may cause. We can blindly turn from what threatens our egotism, even though it might put out the blaze and bring relief. The second noble truth, that suffering arises from an error in understanding, adds that by releasing our hold on wrong views, we can be free of our own self-created suffering. The third truth affirms that the doorknob is within our grasp. The fourth says that there is a way of using body and mind, a way of living that turns the knob and opens the door. Zen adds that opening the door doesn't increase our wisdom or compassion. Instead, it returns us to the wisdom and compassion that was there from the start. Our powers and virtues are hidden from us due to our own limited, delusive, and self-centered views. Zazen, of course, is how we see through those delusive and self-centered views. That's why we practice, to come into reality. Far in the future, the Hunter King will be the Prince Siddhartha Gautama. On a day like any other, he will leave his sheltering palace and step out into the streets of his city. He will be on a hunt then too for what he doesn't yet know. On that day he will experience anguish, for he will see as if for the first time the terror of our daily situation. He will discover the inevitability of sickness, old age, and death. And understand that no matter how we yearn for permanence, no matter what securities we pile around us, we remain as impermanent as dust on the wind. And not just us, but all we love, parents, friends, children, pets. No one and nothing lasts. Not even the self that recognizes this, that wishes it were not so, that writes or reads or hears these words right now, sagely acknowledging, yes, it is so. The Kanara's grief has opened the Hunter King to what's been missing. His hunting trip isn't going to do it. There's nothing wrong with doing what restores us. We all need time away, but we can't stay. It won't solve that thing that wakes us in the night. Whether we're rested or not, the clock keeps ticking. Sometimes we hear it loudly, and at some point, hearing it becomes the motivation we need to go further, to see more deeply and find out what's really going on. The Kanaras are lovely, sensitive beings. Their tender love is admirable, and at the same time, it is sad. Gentle, fragile, yet unchanging, and thus limited creatures, they remain stunned by their experience, overwhelmed by the bitterness of a forced separation. Innocent as lambs led to slaughter, they are stuck, unable to work with their grief and move on. Deeply attached to each other as they have not yet let the greater world in. We humans, while not so pure or so innocent, are made of sterner stuff. We can digest our experiences, recover, learn, and move forward, maturing through grief and losses as we go. This is our strength. What the Bodhisattva has seen strikes a chord. The length of the Kanara's lifespan makes the underlying issues we all face, human or non-human, stand out in stark relief. Life is precious, and time waits for no one. Things we do not want to happen will indeed happen. Even a long and pain-free life and the guarantee of a gentle death don't offer final escape. Time lost can never be reclaimed. We must find peace and freedom where we are, as we are, or like the Kanaras, will be stuck in an old story, unable to fully live each new moment. The Bodhisattva's close encounter with these non-human beings serves as his wake-up call. Now he decides to head home, dig in, and do his best right where he is, no longer seeking isolation or escape. He remembers what and perhaps who really matters. Each ordinary moment, laden with responsibilities and complexities, has become precious to him. none of it to be wasted or missed. Once gone, not an instant or iota of it can ever be reclaimed. The king on our story comes back down the mountain with a glimmer of something. Call it faith, hope, insight, resolve, strength, or prajna, wisdom. Call it knowledge, kindness, generosity, or skill. Whatever you call it, however faint it might be, don't overlook it. We are changed by such moments if we don't suppress or bury them. They become tipping points if we open to them. True tender non-humans wept bitterly over a single long-gone night of separation. Though they would live for 1,000 years, even such a small separation, not a minute of which could be replaced, seemed terrible to them. Tender as they were, they presented the king with the truth pitiless as iron. Time waits for no one. Do not waste a minute. Each is fleeting and precious. Each is your life. Perhaps you remember the admonition given at nighttime at the end of formal zazen in Sesshin. I beg to urge you, everyone, life and death is a grave matter. All things pass quickly away. Each of you must be completely alert, never neglectful, never indulgent. The Kinnaras reminded the king that any life, no matter how lengthy, is fraught with unavoidable complexities that are likely to bring with them discomfort, anguish, and sorrow. How do we find our peace in the great flux? How do we find freedom when the heat and cold of painful, difficult, unwanted experiences come our way? A monk once asked, "How do I escape heat and cold?" The master answered, "When heat comes, let the heat kill you. When the cold comes, let the cold kill you." Given all this, how do we live our lives without endlessly yearning for what is not and what has not been? The good news is that experiencing separation can help us realize how far we are from where we truly want to be. It can itself be a way of refining and correcting a too limited view. The first noble truth is noble because it is an insight into reality. Its grave music marks our first, perhaps somewhat tentative steps along the long and winding road that leads us home.